to the Counter Extremism Project for the invite, and thanks, of course, to Kacper for, frankly, suggesting me to sit in and be the whatever we're going discussant, I think is the term we're looking for. I did tell him beforehand, I think we had originally planned to give more time to me to present, and I said earlier today, no, this is your book presentation. I don't have a ton to contribute right now, and I don't want to take the floor away from you. So I just wanted to give a few sort of brief remarks or comments on on Kacper's research, everything leading up to the book, and the whole issue of foreign fighters in the war in Ukraine. And because I focus on the far right, obviously I am particularly interested in the issue of far-right foreign fighters. And I think we all know that's the issue when it comes to those 4 words, foreign fighters in Ukraine. It's the far right that mostly comes up in public discourse and media discourse. But what I'd first want to say is I really want to underscore and stress how important Kacper's research has been over the past few years in sort of building a bigger and broader evidence base and helping give more of a proper debate or discussion to an issue that has often been plagued by flat out myths or misconceptions, sometimes well-intentioned misconceptions, presuppositions, people's expectations, people's worries, that when it comes to the issue of far-right foreign fighters in Ukraine, Kacper's been able to really put this issue in a much broader context, provide some much richer and more detailed information, and that classic word, more nuanced information and debates. And I think this is really apparent when it became really apparent, just under a year ago, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as Kacper rightly puts it, on February 24th, 2022. It's a cliche to say that it changed everything in terms of those of us who pay attention to this issue, because, well, it did. And right away, in a lot of, I would say, English language international discourse, and particularly, I think, American discourse and discussion, one of the issues that was first discussed by some commentators was sometimes this, almost like this supposition, or this, not even a fear, because it was stated almost by some commentators as if it was going to be a given, that now all of a sudden, with this full-scale invasion, with a war now breaking out to something far beyond what I think a lot of us had ever imagined, far beyond anything we'd seen in 2014 or 15. There were a lot of people thinking that, a lot of foreign far-right, and especially American far-right extremists, are about to flock to Ukraine to go join Azov, particularly, of course, partly thanks to me, unfortunately, or fortunately, that being one of the names that come up. They're going, all these foreign far-right figures are going to go join Azov, and they're going to get the skills they need to commit terror acts across Western Europe, across the United States, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all variations of that argument. And to be clear, I'm not dismissing that argument or that worry altogether. But when I saw some of these comments come through my screen, I remember just thinking, no, they're not. They're even before February 27th, the date when, as Kacper mentioned, when Zelensky announced the International Legion, I wasn't expecting there to be tons of either far-right foreign volunteers or considerable numbers of foreign volunteers going to fill the ranks of the Azov regiment or any Azov-affiliated, what ended up becoming new military units. And I think what Kacper's research has been so good at doing was building a foundation for something that we didn't expect necessarily, that full-scale invasion. So when there were instances where people were thinking, all these foreign far-right extremists, now they have a chance to go join Azov and fight in a war. These pro-Russian, American, or other far-right extremists, they're going to go to Russia and get, go fight on the other side. And compared to the numbers that people might have dreamed about or had nightmares about, or compared to rhetoric people talking about in years past about, like far right ISIS, whether in partial jest or in total seriousness, nothing like that has transpired in terms of international far right extremists being involved, and particularly on the Ukrainian side, where I think we can discuss in the Q&A that question of numbers, how many. I don't have, we can maybe ask the question later. I don't have an answer right away, but the fact that individuals like Kacper and myself can go on to some of these far right Telegram channels and chat groups related to some of these smaller, more fringe far right military units that aren't Azov, actually, that we can look at these channels and we actually know who some of these foreign individuals are that are talked about. Oh, we're interviewing this Polish patriot or nationalist who's coming to fight for our unit. The numbers, some of them are small enough that we know who they are, or people I know who they are by name, which means security services, police, whoever needs to know also knows as well. So that's made me, much less concerned about some of these issues that have been brought up in the past. Before going to questions, one thing that I wanted to mention in terms of just trying to look forward on what is to come with this war. I mean, I certainly, or the first few weeks of the war, the invasion, pardon me, in February and March of last year, I had some vague hopes that it would be over in a couple of months, but even I really knew at the time, I was like, no, this is not going to be like that. And we're almost a year in, and I don't think anybody expects this to be a war that ends anytime soon. Sadly, I think it's going to be something like Bosnia, where it's going to be several years and a lot for future generations in Ukraine and in Central and Eastern Europe to unfortunately have to unpack. So there's so many, to say that there's so many unknowns right now, to say that there's so much fluidity in terms of the situations on the ground is just the understatement of understatements. But in terms of things that we could look at in the short term, what I can do is suggest or indicate two things that I'm actually interested in, whether I'm specifically researching or writing about them now or not, but they're two things that have come up to me. And one of them relates to the Russian side, and it relates to these fellows from Wagner. And now we don't have to say he's their alleged patron, because he finally came out and admitted it, Yevgeny Prigozhin. I think if people if people who are listening are from or familiar with the Western Balkans and Serbia, they will have seen this week and in previous weeks a lot of news and discussion about Wagner's alleged recruiting and operations that may be going on in Serbia. Now, do I think Wagner is really seriously expecting a lot of recruits for its mercenary or paramilitary unit to come out of Serbia? No, I don't think so. But from previous research that I've done over the past few months, it's very clear to me that Prigozhin really seems to be an individual who is, trying to build some sort of patronage network in the Western Balkans to sort of cultivate some loyal far-right extremists on the ground in Serbia. And that comes in the form, I would think that comes in the form of this so-called Narodna Patrola, the People's Patrol, is a kind of a fringe far-right group in Serbia that their leader has gone to Russia on several occasions since the invasion, and most recently was in Russia visiting Wagner's headquarters. So I could discuss that in more detail, but I discussed that in an article a few months ago in September in The Guardian, if people recall that or want to go back and read that. It's very clear to me that Prigozhin's alleged efforts in the Western Balkans and elsewhere are really something to keep an eye on, not necessarily because they are part of a process that will get a lot of foreign fighter recruits, but because they are efforts that could very much destabilize countries, governments, states, and really create some problems. And my second and maybe less, frankly, less urgent thing, one of the things that I pay attention to is actually on the Ukrainian side. Now, people would probably expect me to that the four-letter word that I'd mention right now is Azov, and shockingly, this doesn't actually directly pertain to them. What I think sometimes gets missed or not discussed enough, whether it's in media or in research or in anywhere, is the fact that on the Ukrainian side, there are some far-right extremist bad actors who allegedly and also actually have long histories in organized crime, in criminal behavior, in corrupt activities, in violence, up to and allegedly including murder. Those individuals are still around on the Ukrainian side. I'm not going to name names, but people who know Ukraine and follow Ukraine know who some of those names and small groups are. And some of them are actually not Ukrainians. A lot of them are actually Russians who have been active in Ukraine since 2014. Some of them, or all of them, frankly, having had some history with the Azov regiment or the battalion before that. One thing that I really think Ukraine and Ukraine's backers need to, of the unfortunately many things that I think would need to be paid attention to as this terrible war goes on, and whenever we get to some period that could, even in 10 inverted commas, be called a post-war period, one of those things is not necessarily focusing as much on the big names like Azov, who, thanks to me, have a book about them. It's actually focusing on some of these more lesser known or even more fringe and smaller actors who, because they have some level of involvement in criminal activities, allegedly, they can actually do a heck of a lot in a post-war period to further destabilize Ukraine. So those are just two things I wanted to mention in terms that relate in various ways to foreign fighters and foreign presence in Ukraine that I wanted to bring attention to. But in terms of my comments, that's really all that I have. Again, the only thing that I would stress is that trying to predict what's going to happen in Ukraine, I think, is a fool's errand at the best of times. And it certainly is now. All we can do, whether we're journalists, researchers, scholars, members of the general public who are interested, is just keep following, seeing, observing, analyzing, and being careful with the conclusions that we draw. And again, that's why Kacper's work has been so valuable, because he's done exactly that. So thank you.